Most people who survive their soul's dangerous test never realize they passed it. But if you've ever felt like you're living in a completely different reality than everyone around you, if you've questioned your own sanity during your darkest moments, you might have already undergone what Carl Jung called the most brutal psychological transformation possible. And there are 7 hidden signs that prove you're now operating from a completely different level of consciousness. The first sign will shock you. You've developed supernatural emotional radar. Here's what nobody tells you about surviving psychological hell. You don't just recover, you develop abilities that seem almost supernatural. The first sign is that you can now read people's emotions before they even know what they're feeling themselves. Jung discovered this in 1912 when treating a patient named Maria, a woman who'd survived what he called a complete psychic breakdown. Instead of just healing, something extraordinary happened. Maria began predicting her husband's mood swings 3 days before they occurred. She could sense her children's anxiety attacks before any symptoms appeared. Jung initially thought this was coincidence. Then he noticed the same pattern in patient after patient who'd survived their psychological crisis. Modern neuroscience now explains what Jung observed. When you survive extreme psychological trauma, your mirror neuron system actually rewires itself. Dr. Marco Iacoboni's research at UCLA shows that people who've undergone severe emotional stress develop hyperactive mirror neuron networks, essentially turning you into a human emotion detector. Before this transformation, you'd walk into rooms feeling confused by the energy. Now you immediately know who's angry, who's hiding sadness, who's pretending to be fine. Here's where most people stumble. They think this ability is a curse. Jung discovered it's actually your greatest weapon. While everyone else is playing emotional checkers, you're playing chess. You can predict relationship conflicts before they explode. You spot toxic people within minutes of meeting them. You know when someone's lying, not because of what they say, but because their emotional signature feels wrong. Jung called this the transcendent function, the ability to perceive what's hidden beneath surface interactions. The challenge? Learning to manage the overwhelming input. Jung developed a 3-step technique specifically for this. Step 1, the body scan protocol. When you enter any space, do a quick internal scan. Notice where you feel tension, heaviness, or energy shifts in your body. This distinguishes your baseline from absorbed emotions. Step 2, the emotional separation technique. Ask yourself, is this feeling mine, or am I picking up someone else's emotional state? Clinical data shows that 70% of intense emotions in social settings aren't actually yours. Step 3, strategic emotional data usage. Use this information like a GPS system for relationships. Someone whose emotional signature feels chaotic, maintain distance. Someone whose energy feels aligned and peaceful, explore deeper connection. Take Sarah Chen, a Silicon Valley executive who understood this ability after her corporate burnout. She now uses emotional radar to predict team dynamics before major meetings, spot potential conflicts before they explode, and identify which employees are struggling before productivity drops. Her success rate in team management improved by 400% once she learned to trust this data. The warning: when this ability first activates, you might feel overwhelmed by the emotional noise around you. The key is learning that you can sense without absorbing. You're not responsible for managing everyone else's emotional state. You're responsible for using this information wisely. If you've ever surprised someone by revealing you knew more about their emotional state than they thought possible, comment, "I was always watching." The emotional radar is just the beginning. The second sign shows how your relationship with anger completely transformed. Your anger became a sacred weapon. Before your crisis, anger was either explosive or buried. Now it's become something entirely different, a precision instrument that activates only when truly needed. Jung documented this in his patient Heinrich, a German businessman who'd lost everything in 1923. Heinrich came to therapy consumed by rage that was destroying his remaining relationships. Something fascinating emerged during his recovery. Heinrich's anger wasn't random. It activated only when his core values were violated. His fury had become, in Jung's words, morally intelligent. Before, you'd get angry at traffic jams and rude waiters. Now your anger ignites only for what matters: injustice, manipulation, people who harm the vulnerable. This isn't emotional regulation. This is emotional evolution. Dr. Lisa Barrett's research on emotional granularity shows that people who've survived severe psychological stress develop what she calls anger specificity. Your brain literally rewires to distinguish between dozens of different types of anger, each calibrated for different threats. Therefore, your anger now burns away exactly what needs to go: relationships that drain you, commitments that diminish you, patterns that keep you small. Maya Angelou described this exact transformation after surviving childhood trauma. Her anger became, in her words, a sword that cuts through lies. There's a specific incident that illustrates this perfectly. When she worked as a streetcar conductor in San Francisco, facing daily racism, her sacred anger didn't explode outward. It crystallized into the poem, "Still I Rise." That anger, channeled consciously, became one of the most powerful pieces of literature in human history. Jung himself experienced this during his famous split with Freud in 1913. Instead of petty academic rivalry, Jung's anger at Freud's dogmatic approach became the fuel for revolutionary theories about the unconscious. His anger wasn't personal. It served psychological truth. Jung developed what he called the 24-hour anger audit for patients learning to work with this sacred fury. When anger arises, wait 24 hours before acting. During this time, ask 3 questions. What value of mine is being violated? What boundary needs to be established or reinforced? What action would serve growth rather than destruction? Sacred anger almost always points toward necessary action: ending toxic relationships, speaking truth in corrupt systems, protecting the vulnerable from harm. Integration technique. Honor your anger as a guardian, not a destroyer. When it activates, ask, what is this protecting? Not, how do I make it stop? Here's what's really shocking. This sacred anger makes you irresistibly attractive to healthy people, while naturally repelling those who would use you. Secure individuals recognize the integrity in someone whose anger serves justice rather than ego. The transformation goes even deeper. The third sign reveals how you became completely immune to manipulation tactics that fool most people. You've become immune to emotional manipulation. This might be the most valuable superpower you've developed, and most people don't even realize they have it. You now spot manipulation tactics that fool 95% of the population. Let me tell you about Marcus, a 34-year-old marketing director at a Fortune 500 company. After his psychological breakdown and subsequent integration, something remarkable happened during a board meeting. His CEO was using a classic manipulation technique, creating false urgency around a bad decision. We need to move on this today, or we'll lose everything. Marcus felt the familiar tug, that old anxiety that would have made him comply immediately. But this time, he watched the manipulation attempt with detached clarity. He saw the CEO's micro-expressions betraying fear, not confidence. He noticed how the urgency conveniently bypassed proper due diligence. He recognized the guilt trip embedded in team player language. While everyone else in the room got swept up in manufactured panic, Marcus calmly asked, "What specific data supports this timeline? Can we review the risk analysis?" The CEO's manipulation collapsed under direct questioning. The decision was postponed, properly vetted, and ultimately saved the company $3.2 million. This is your new operating system. Guilt trips bounce off you. Love bombing feels transparent. Gaslighting attempts seem almost comically obvious. Dr. Ramani Durvasula's research on narcissistic abuse recovery shows that survivors develop what she calls manipulation immunity. Your brain's pattern recognition system becomes so refined that you spot emotional traps before stepping into them. What nobody talks about is the neuroscience behind this immunity. Your anterior cingulate cortex, the brain region responsible for emotional regulation, literally thickens after surviving psychological trauma. Simultaneously, your prefrontal cortex develops enhanced pattern recognition capabilities. You're running advanced threat detection software that most people don't possess. The 5 most common manipulation tactics now register instantly in your awareness. You recognize guilt tripping the moment someone says, "If you really cared." You know that genuine love doesn't operate through obligation. When someone tries gaslighting, that never happened. You're being too sensitive. Your trust in your own memory remains unshakable. Love bombing triggers immediate caution rather than flattery. You understand that genuine connection builds gradually, not explosively. Triangulation, everyone else thinks you're wrong, no longer works because you know healthy people address conflicts directly. And Darvo tactics, where manipulators make themselves the victim when confronted, can't derail you from the original issue. What changes everything is this: you can now support people without losing yourself in their chaos. You offer presence without sacrificing your peace. Your compassion evolved from the codependent variety that sacrifices itself to rescue others into what Jung called mature compassion, love without enabling. Dr. Richard Davidson calls this emotional resilience architecture. Your brain maintains compassion while simultaneously protecting your psychological boundaries. Therefore, crises that once destabilized you for weeks now feel like temporary weather patterns. This immunity creates an interesting side effect. The 4th sign shows how your entire relationship with time underwent a fundamental transformation. Time became your ally, not your enemy. Your relationship with time underwent a complete transformation that most people will never understand. Before your crisis, time felt like a scarce resource to be hoarded or an enemy to be defeated. Now time feels like a dimension of existence to be inhabited fully. Viktor Frankl's experience after surviving the concentration camps illustrates this shift perfectly. In the camps, Frankl noticed something profound. Those who maintained hope weren't counting days until liberation. They were finding meaning in each present moment, even under unimaginable conditions. Frankl wrote that he would mentally transport himself to lecture halls where he'd teach about his camp experiences. This wasn't escape. It was what Jung called active imagination, the ability to use temporal consciousness strategically. Frankl was simultaneously fully present to his suffering and connected to a meaningful future, creating what he termed tragic optimism. The science behind this is fascinating. Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky's research shows that people who've undergone post-traumatic growth develop altered activity in their posterior parietal cortex, the brain region that processes temporal perception. Your brain rewires to experience time differently. You no longer rush frantically toward future goals or remain stuck reliving past wounds. Instead, you inhabit what Jung called active patience, the ability to work toward long-term visions while remaining fully present. Jung developed a specific technique he called Chronos versus Kairos consciousness. Chronos is linear, clock time, the time of deadlines and schedules. Kairos is meaningful time, the time of insight, connection, and transformation. Most people live entirely in Chronos time, always rushing toward the next thing. You've learned to inhabit Kairos time, where a 5-minute conversation can shift your entire life trajectory. Jung's active imagination time technique involves 3 steps. Step 1. Present moment anchoring. Begin each day with 5 minutes of complete presence. Not meditation in the traditional sense, but full awareness of this exact moment's texture, quality, and aliveness. Step 2. Future visioning. Spend time connecting with your future self, not planning or strategizing, but feeling into the person you're becoming. This creates what Jung called magnetic pull toward wholeness. Step 3. Past integration. Review past experiences, not as fixed history, but as ongoing sources of wisdom. Your past becomes a library of insights rather than a prison of regrets. Your decision-making process completely shifted. Before, you needed extensive pros and cons lists. Now you consult what Jung termed the inner counsel, an intuitive knowing that connects you to information beyond rational analysis. The challenge? You might find yourself frustrated when others can't see obvious patterns or make decisions that seem glaringly poor to you. Remember that your temporal perspective is earned wisdom, not common sense. Use it strategically, but don't expect others to operate from the same vantage point. Here's the modern productivity paradox. While everyone else is trying to manage time through apps and systems, you've learned that time management fails because it treats time as the enemy. Temporal sovereignty succeeds because it recognizes time as the medium through which consciousness expresses itself. This temporal mastery sets the stage for an even more profound transformation. The 5th sign reveals how your intuition became something that seems almost supernatural. Your intuition became a direct line to truth. This is where your transformation moves beyond psychology into something that feels almost mystical. Think back to the last time you had a strong intuitive hit about something. Maybe you suddenly knew you needed to call someone, and it turned out they desperately needed to hear from you. Or you felt compelled to take a different route home, only to discover later you'd avoided a major accident. Or you met someone and immediately knew, without logical reason, that this person would play a significant role in your life. Before your crisis, you probably dismissed these moments as coincidence or luck. Now you understand they're data points in a much larger pattern. Your intuitive capacity has blossomed into a fully activated function. Where once you relied primarily on logical analysis, you now access information that seems to come from beyond your personal experience. Modern research by Dr. Dean Radin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences provides remarkable validation for what you're experiencing. His experiments show that trauma survivors score 23% higher on remote viewing tests, 31% higher on precognitive tasks, and show measurable physiological responses to future events up to 10 seconds before they occur. This isn't mysticism. This is measurable enhancement of your information processing capabilities. What this means practically, you now have access to information that gives you an almost unfair advantage in life decisions. You can sense whether job opportunities will lead to growth or stagnation within minutes of the interview. You know which relationships have long-term potential within weeks of meeting someone. You spot emerging trends in your field before they become obvious to others. Jung experienced this himself during his confrontation with the unconscious from 1913 to 1916. He began having prophetic dreams with startling accuracy. He dreamed of Europe drowning in blood months before World War I erupted. He saw specific patients' breakthrough moments weeks before they occurred. These experiences convinced him that consciousness extends far beyond individual awareness. Jung developed a practical method for recognizing and working with meaningful coincidences. The Synchronicity Tracking Protocol. Notice without forcing. Pay attention to patterns and connections without trying to manufacture them. Record without judgment. Keep a simple log of meaningful coincidences without analyzing them immediately. Act on clear guidance. When intuitive information comes with unmistakable clarity and emotional resonance, honor it with action. Distinguish between fear and intuition. Fear feels contracted and urgent. True intuition feels expansive and calm, even when warning you of danger. The crucial distinction. There's a difference between enhanced intuitive ability and magical thinking. True intuitive development maintains connection to rational analysis while accessing expanded information sources. Magical thinking abandons rationality entirely and can lead to delusion. The key is learning to honor your intuitive gifts as valuable data, not infallible truth. The most successful integration combines expanded intuitive capacity with grounded rational analysis. If you've learned to trust your intuition completely and no longer second-guess what you sense, comment, "I no longer doubt what I see and feel." This intuitive development naturally leads to the sixth transformation, which might be the most liberating of all. External validation became irrelevant. This transformation is so profound, it's like being released from an invisible prison you didn't know existed. Your self-worth no longer fluctuates with the changing tides of others' opinions. Criticism and praise register with similar neutrality, processed as information, not verdicts on your value as a human being. Carl Jung himself embodied this after his own crisis, what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, from 1913-1916. When he emerged, he no longer needed approval from the psychiatric establishment, which freed him to develop revolutionary ideas. The medical community ridiculed his concepts of the collective unconscious, archetypes, and synchronicity, but Jung's inner authority was so solid that external opposition actually strengthened his resolve. He wrote in his journals, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." This wasn't positive thinking. This was the voice of someone who discovered an internal validation system that operated independently of external feedback. Dr. Kristin Neff's research on self-compassion confirms that people who've survived psychological trauma often develop what she calls authentic self-regard, self-worth, based on inherent value rather than external achievement. Before your crisis, you'd scan every room for approval signals. Now you enter spaces as someone who belongs to themselves first. The shift happens in stages. First, you recognize how much of your personality was constructed to gain approval, rather than express authenticity. This recognition is often devastating. You realize you've been living someone else's life. Then, the crisis itself typically destroys your ability to maintain inauthentic personas. You literally can't pretend anymore. It becomes energetically impossible. The masks crack and fall away. Next, you discover what you actually believe, value, and desire, separate from what you were taught to want. This feels like meeting yourself for the first time. Finally, you establish an internal validation system that operates independently of external feedback. This is true inner authority. Your crisis specifically targeted and dissolved childhood programming about worthiness. Most people spend their entire lives trying to earn love they believed was conditional. The crisis reveals that this conditional love wasn't actually love. It was manipulation. This realization simultaneously devastates and liberates you. The social consequences can be challenging. Some people become threatened by your authenticity because it reflects their own inauthenticity back to them. Family members who controlled you through guilt or obligation may react with anger when these tactics stop working. Colleagues who bonded with you through shared complaints feel confused when you stop participating in negativity. Jung developed what he called the mirror exercise for maintaining inner authority under social pressure. When someone criticizes or praises you, imagine their words bouncing off a mirror. Ask yourself, what does this feedback reveal about the person giving it? Often, Criticism tells you more about the critic's insecurities than about you. Similarly, excessive praise might reveal someone's need to manipulate through flattery. What's strategically powerful? This inner authority makes you incredibly attractive to secure, confident people, while naturally repelling those who need others to be insecure. Your authenticity became non-negotiable. You naturally choose rejection for who you truly are over acceptance for a performance. Integration technique. Recognize that some people will be threatened by your self-possession. This isn't your problem to solve. It's information about their relationship with their own authenticity. This inner authority creates the foundation for the final transformation, one Jung considered the hallmark of the fully individuated personality. You became energetically sovereign. This final sign represents the culmination of your transformation, the ability to protect your essence without aggression, simply through conscious choice. Your presence became more selective and more precious. You no longer distribute yourself indiscriminately across every person who requests your energy. Let me tell you about Elena, a creative director who went through this exact transformation. Before her crisis, Elena was everyone's go-to person. Need help with a project? Call Elena. Having a personal crisis at 2 a.m.? Text Elena. Want free creative consulting? Elena will squeeze you in. Her calendar was completely full, yet she felt completely empty. After her breakdown and integration, something shifted. Elena began what she called energetic accounting. She tracked not just her time, but how different interactions affected her vitality. She noticed that coffee with her friend Sarah left her energized and inspired. They'd spend 2 hours together, and Elena would leave with 3 new ideas and genuine joy. But lunch with her colleague David left her exhausted. He'd spend the entire hour complaining about problems while rejecting every solution she offered. Both interactions took the same amount of time, but one added value to her life, and one drained it. Eleanor started making different choices, not out of cruelty, but out of wisdom about the sacred nature of her own life force. Dr. Elaine Aron's research on highly sensitive people provides scientific backing for this transformation. She found that people who've integrated their sensitivity develop what she calls energetic discrimination, the ability to quickly assess whether interactions will be mutually nourishing or one-sidedly draining. Dr. Aron's studies show that highly sensitive people who've undergone integration have measurably different brain activity in areas associated with empathy and boundary formation. Their brains develop enhanced ability to distinguish between healthy and unhealthy energy exchanges. The guilt that once accompanied setting limits completely dissolved. Elena and you learn to protect energy with the naturalness of protecting any precious resource. Jung developed what he called the energy investment portfolio, a framework for strategic life force allocation. Think of your energy like a financial portfolio. You wouldn't invest all your money in ventures with no return. Why invest your life force that way? Consider allocating high-return relationships. People who consistently add value to your life while respecting your boundaries. Growth-oriented projects. Work and creative endeavors aligned with your authentic values. Rest and restoration. Solitude. Nature. Activities that replenish rather than drain. Service and contribution. Helping others in ways that energize rather than deplete you. Necessary obligations. Unavoidable responsibilities managed with clear boundaries. People who allocated their energy this way experienced what Jung called sustainable vitality, the ability to maintain high levels of engagement without burnout. Here's the paradox. The more selective you became with your energy, the more powerful your impact when you did choose to engage. Elena's relationships deepened because they were now based on genuine compatibility rather than unconscious neediness. Her work became more effective because it flowed from authentic passion rather than external pressure. The challenge is recognizing what Jung called energy vampires, individuals who consistently drain your vitality without offering authentic exchange. Picture this scenario. You're at a networking event. A colleague approaches and immediately launches into a crisis. Their project is falling apart, their team hates them, their boss is impossible. They ask for your advice. You offer 3 concrete solutions. They reject each one with yes, but you offer to connect them with resources. I've already tried everything. You suggest they speak with HR. That won't work because after 30 minutes, you realize they don't want solutions. They want an emotional dumping ground. Meanwhile, you've missed conversations with 3 people who could have been genuine connections. Your new response? I can see you're struggling. Here are some resources that might help. Then you exit the conversation without guilt. This isn't cruelty. It's clarity about the difference between supporting someone's growth and enabling their avoidance of necessary lessons. Jung developed specific boundary-setting scripts for protecting energy without guilt. I care about you, and I'm not available for that. I can see you're struggling. Here are some resources that might help. I'm honored you trust me with this, and I'm not the right person to help with this particular issue. I have a policy of not discussing other people's personal lives. I'm taking some time to focus on my own growth right now. If you've noticed that your presence alone sometimes makes others uncomfortable, and you understand it's not about judgment, but about clarity, comment, I don't judge, I just see clearly. You now notice that your mere presence makes certain people uncomfortable, not because you're judging them, but because your clarity reflects their own unconsciousness back to them. Secure, integrated people feel at peace around you. Those operating from ego, manipulation, or unconsciousness feel exposed. This energetic sovereignty represents the full flowering of your transformation. You've moved from unconscious survival to conscious choice in every area of your life. If you recognize yourself in these 7 signs, know that you've passed through an initiation that most people will never understand. You survived your soul's most dangerous test, and instead of just recovering, you developed abilities that seem almost supernatural to those who haven't walked this path. Your transformation serves not only your own evolution, but creates a template of possibility for others who are still in the darkness of their own crisis. Most people who survive their soul's dangerous test never realize they passed it. But now you know, and more importantly, you know how to use these abilities strategically. Jung spent his lifetime developing what he called the wholeness meditation, a final integration technique for those who've completed their dangerous test. Sit quietly and feel into each of your 7 transformed abilities. Notice how they work together as an integrated system. Your emotional radar informs your sacred anger, which protects your energy sovereignty, which is guided by your enhanced intuition, which operates from inner authority, which allows you to transcend manipulation, which gives you mastery over time itself. You now possess what Jung called the individuated consciousness, the ability to remain whole while navigating a world full of unconscious people operating from wounds, fears, and unintegrated shadows. Your next steps aren't about acquiring more abilities. They're about refining and strategically applying what you've already developed. You're now equipped to build relationships based on authentic compatibility rather than unconscious neediness. Create work that flows from your deepest talents rather than external pressure. Navigate conflict from clarity rather than reactivity. Make decisions from wisdom rather than fear. Contribute to the world from wholeness rather than woundedness. The question Jung posed to all his individuated patients applies to you now. How will you use these gifts, not just for your own fulfillment, but in service of something larger than yourself? Your journey of conscious evolution has only just begun, but you now possess the tools Jung spent his lifetime learning. The ability to transform poison into medicine, chaos into clarity, and suffering into wisdom. You carry the quiet dignity of someone who has met themselves completely and found not perfection, but wholeness. Finding others who've passed this same test becomes important now. They'll recognize you immediately, not through words, but through the quality of presence that can only come from having survived and integrated your own psychological death and rebirth. The secret Jung spent his lifetime learning became your lived reality. The soul does not grow despite suffering, but through a conscious and transformative relationship with it. Your pain became your teacher, your wounds became your wisdom. Most people who survive their soul's dangerous test never realize they passed it. But now you know, and your awareness of this transformation becomes a gift not just to yourself, but to everyone whose life you touch. The question isn't whether you're worthy of this transformation. It's how you'll use these gifts to create the life your soul was meant to live. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.